Good evening. If everyone could find a seat, we're going to be calling the meeting to order.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to open the zoning board of appeals meeting for the purpose of attending your meeting at 6:32.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now call the Board of Health meeting to order at 6:32. If everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. First up on our agenda is to accept the minutes of the January 19th, 2016 meeting.
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
Second that.
I have a motion to accept in a second. Any discussion? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pass unanimously. Up next is our Region 2 Emergency Preparedness Rep, Sarah. Hi. You can come right up.
Good evening, Ward.
Good evening.
We've discussed doing our emergency dispensing drill the week of April vacation at Shepherd Hill High School, and I just wanted to see how the board felt about extending the invitation to Charlton. They have a very active CERT team, and I know that they may be interested in coming. If you did have an event, you would be calling a CERT team, and most likely it would be this one. I think the more involvement that you have with potential staff, the better. So I wanted to get permission from the board before offering that invitation. There's always the possibility that we could work on a multi-year training plan and ask them to participate in a much larger drill that you would actually get credit for, and keep this one very small, in-house.
Okay.
Aye.
How do you feel? I definitely think we should invite Charlton. And now, the CERT team, does that involve their Board of Health as well? Or is that
Yes.
separate? Okay, good. Because I did speak with a member of the Charlton Board of Health, and they were definitely interested in this, so
Yes.
that would be great. Excellent. And we have the date set for that,
Yes, it's the Saturday of April vacation.
right?
The second Saturday, yeah.
The 23rd, I think, off the end. Excellent.
I'll send out a reminder.
Great. All right.
Just wanted to know if you guys had any other questions on that email with the timeline that I gave you and what I proposed that we exercise.
No, it looked good to me. I think it's a great idea to do.
Okay. So we'd be inviting Boy Scouts,
Yes.
possibly the CERT team from Charlton, and one or two members from the fire department, because we were looking at calling for the trailer to bring over there.
Right, right.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I got all the participants so that I can email them and coordinate that.
That'd be excellent.
And if you have any further questions, just give me a call.
Okay. Excellent, and we'll
Have
see
a
you
good
next
night.
month. Thank you so much. Okay, up next on the agenda is the proposed cemetery for Corbin Road. Before we begin, I'm just going to make a couple statements. I want to thank everyone for coming. You guys can come right up, that's fine. We're going to allow you to give your presentation. Then the board will ask questions. We'll allow the other members of the boards that are here for the town to ask questions. And then we will open it to public for comments. We are going to ask that if you have a comment to come up to the podium. You can line up against the wall and step up to the podium. We are going to ask to keep the comments at the podium so that we can hear everyone and address you properly, so that we make sure that we're not missing any of concerns or anything. So we're going to just keep it in a good civil manner, and feel free to line up and we'll take your comments after we've handled all the board members' comments, okay? Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead. I apologize.
Good evening. My name is Imad Zurain from Develop Zurain, the civil engineer, and with me is Dr. Khalid Sadouzi, the president of the Islamic Society of Greater Worcester. We're here before you presenting the cemetery on Corbin Road. I believe the zoning board hearing last time, the board also was present. So I'll keep the presentation brief. We are proposing a cemetery on the existing farm that's on Corbin Road. We're proposing a driveway off Corbin Road, which is about 1,000 feet long, with a cul-de-sac at the end that will accommodate the fire truck with a turnaround. And we're planning on building the cemetery in phases, probably about 4 phases, which each phase, there'll be a turnaround at the end of the road. We'll start at the beginning of the project and move forward as the graves are filled in. Just to reiterate also regarding the actual barrier, we've gone through the local cemetery commission regulation, rules and regulation, and we will abide by those regulations as far as the barrier is concerned. We looked at the maps for public water supplies, and this site is outside any public water supplies or Zone 2, what's known as Zone 2. Dudley does have a Zone 2 present, which is down in the around the southeast area of the town. If you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to answer.
Okay. Go ahead. Do you want to ask?
First question.
Okay. So what we would like, because we're basically, coming into this, I know you can read many different practices online and things of your burial procedure. We would just like a detailed documentation of what it entails. I don't want to just, there's a lot of hearsay, there's a lot of reading online. So if you had something so that we know exactly what the practice that you're looking for is.
That exactly and present it.
Right, just so that we have something to work from. I don't want to, you can read 6 different versions online, so if we could get something documented from you in writing stating what exactly.
It would be very specific to our
Right,
congregation.
right.
We'll present. We do have that document. So
Okay,
we'll present that.
yeah, if we could get something like that from you, that would be wonderful. You can, drop it off at the Board of Health or somehow get it, you can email it to the Board of Health or something, just so we had that information to review, so that then we can look at that and go from there to see what falls with our guidelines. We're also going to be looking for a map from an engineer with the delineation of wetlands to see where the wetlands are. I know that there's wetlands on the property, but I don't know exactly where they are. I have rough ideas, but it's something that we need more specific for us. We also will need the locations and the measurement. A concern to us is the surrounding wells in the area. So we want to have documentation of how far away the wells are from the where your proposed burial site is, just so that we have an idea. We know that's something that falls in our scope, so that's information that we want. We also would want a soil analysis of the area, and we also would want deep hole testing done to see the water table, which is we would like to know whereabouts the water table is, which is normal. We would like our health agent present for that testing, as well as any members of the Board of Health, or if any other members. Also, conservation, the agent would like to be there as well, and that is another step that you will have to go through with the wetlands, is conservation, which I'm sure you are aware of. That's information that we are going to need, and we will be, once we've had more information, we will send you, I have your address, I will send you a document requiring all of that, telling you exactly what we're looking for in writing, so that you'll have that, and there'll be no question of that. I'll forward that to you.
Yes, I'll review it with you.
Yeah, but that's just to give you an idea of things that we will need that are in our scope before we can,
We understand.
go any further at this point, I believe. And do you have any questions that you'd like?
No, that's the extent of the preliminary information we want.
I have nothing to add.
Okay. Do any other town officials have anything they'd like to add, or questions they'd like to ask? All set? Okay. Okay.
A question on the
Oh, most
soil
certainly.
testing. is the agent, is a full-time agent, or we have a part-time agent?
We have a part-time
Part-time
agent, yeah.
They work how many days a week, or?
He's more of like he's roughly
call.
11 hours a week, so he's here when we need him, does what, goes to
Okay.
different things.
So we'll call him.
Yeah, basically what we'll do is I will get you the documentation, and then we can arrange, when you're going to have an engineer, and hopefully we can arrange through conservation and everything to get out there and for the members to be able to be there just to see and to find out what exactly the land entails.
Understand.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for you? Okay. At this point, if anyone in the public has any questions, they're more than happy to come up to the podium. We'll open it up for a moment. You could come up to the podium, please.
I'd just like you to be able to turn this map around because
Sure.
none of us can see it, please.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Yep, if you could come up to the podium and identify who you are and where you live, please.
Yes, my name is Richard Raymond. I live on 191 Corbin Road, and I'm a direct abutter. Okay. I got several questions for the Board of Health. First of all, a comment to the Board of Health. Thank you very much for that list of, you covered a lot of concerns that are out there on what you're going to require for them to prove, so we can intelligently find out, any effects to the water table, because that land has been tested for a public water supply and has been approved and been recommended to be a public water supply as well. So there's some grave concerns about that. Along with the wetland situation, down in being a direct abutter, being there for 40 years and knowing the land quite well, until it got overgrown with thicket, there are at least 2 ponds and 1 stream that runs through there. That a bunch of wildlife, and I know that's not yours, that's conservation. But in doing so, that raises a concern to how much land of the 55 acres would actually be usable for siting of plots, okay? Which raises the question, when we were at the Zoning Board of Appeals hearing a couple weeks ago, it was portrayed to us that this, in several areas, that this cemetery, this proposed cemetery, would have a 100-year life to it with approximately 16,000 plots. To have that kind of detail, okay, first of all, somebody would have had to do some mapping rather than just guessing, or let's say just guessing square footage on 55 acres, and they're going to have to scale back, which changes things dramatically. Or if they're not going to scale back, where are they going to be, and how congested it's going to be in those areas for 16,000. It was also portrayed to us at the time by your group, and I'm sorry, I don't, the Islamic Society of Worcester, I'm sorry, no disrespect, that there'd be like 9 burials a year. Well, there's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, okay? If you got a 100-year life to a cemetery with 16,000 sites, that's 160 burials a year, or a little over 3 a week. So it blows the heck out of 9 a year. I do understand that may have been speaking just for the greater Worcester area, but was also discovered that this was going to be a regional cemetery, and in the region from Enfield to Dudley puts us into the greater Boston area insofar as that goes. So 160 a year on average certainly, changes, what was being portrayed to us at the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Is your question to confirm the number of burials per year?
Well, to confirm the number is based upon how much is usable land, and do they have to scale back? And if they're not going to scale back, it's 160. You get a congestion. And if there's more burials per year, the decaying bodies would have would accelerate any contamination concerns versus 9 a year. Okay.
Understood. So the question is, the number of burials per year is your question?
Right.
Yeah.
And even though they may have been speaking just for the greater Worcester area, where they're going to be the caretakers and owners of the property, they would have to allow the greater Boston area or any other area that's going to come in to bury there. So therefore, they have control well beyond 9. Okay? So I didn't care for it when I went back home and gave it some quick thought, and then we were kind of misled when it came to that. And so what's going to be, what's truly going to be the burial rate per year, the number of bodies that are going in the ground per year, okay, is also going to have an effect upon the probability of contamination of the groundwater, because if you got 10 people a year versus 160 a year, you have more decaying bodies in the same watershed.
Okay. Thank you. Would you like to revise?
The fact is, we've had in the past couple of years an average of 9 burials a year. We've been looking for a cemetery for quite some time, knowing that Enfield is at 85% capacity right now. It will still take the Connecticut area. We've been looking, like I said, 5 to 10 acres maximum. This land was available. It is 25 acres of usable land. The question was asked last time, how many graves can a 25 acres fit? And it's a math, basically. It's a 10 by 4 graves with a couple of feet of on the outside. I divided that area by the area of the grave. That's where 16,000 came from. Boston area has their own cemetery. There's one in Roxbury, West Roxbury. There's one in Rhode Island. So we're looking for our own cemetery for our congregation at this time right now. I can't speak what's going to happen 50 years from now, but the plan right now is this is something for us, for the congregation that we're in. And the average is about 9 a year. 9 burials a year.
Okay. You can step right up to the microphone and just identify who you are and where you live, please.
Yes, my name is Lynn Sklage, and I live at 129 Corbin Road in Dudley. I would like to just point out that I do have an issue with the map that they have showing that little stream going through their property, and I want to...
Certainly.
The next page shows more detail. I went onto the town website and searched the Conservation Commission and a number of links that are there, and one of them specifically refers to the streams in Dudley as well as the number of abutting towns. This map shows one small stream going through the site. If you look at the map that I just gave to you, which is on record at the UMass, this is part of the links right from the Conservation Commission. There are a number of streams going from that site all the way down, feeding into all of our ponds. And I'm sorry if I'm a bit nervous. I'm not a public speaker.
Okay.
When it comes to the number of burials, there was an article in the Sunday Telegram referring to this Enfield, Connecticut cemetery. The cemetery director said that they have approximately 200 burials per year. They are now getting filled to capacity. They have burials from the state of New York, from the state of Massachusetts, from abutting states. If Enfield, Connecticut is now full, and they are the only regional large Muslim cemetery in New England, everyone is going to be centralized to Dudley. Your 200 burials a year that are no longer going to happen in Enfield, Connecticut will now be routed to Massachusetts. At the ZBA meeting, they stated that they would be selling the lots to make up for the amount of money they had to pay for the cemetery property itself. When it comes to 200 fewer burials a year, you're looking at roughly 4 a week coming down our little tiny winding roads. Enfield, Connecticut is a city of 44,000 and more. Dudley is a small town of 11,000. I don't think that Dudley is the appropriate place for this type of use. No disrespect to the religion, but I just feel that with all of the watershed, with all of the streams, all of the ponds involved, I don't think that this is a proper use for the town of Dudley. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to
the
give...
wetland issue.
Go ahead, please respond.
It will be addressed at the Conservation Commission.
Right.
That's no question about it. But
Right.
the line we're showing is not a stream. It's actually the limit of wetland. All the land beyond that line is actually wetland. Similarly, on top, we're showing the wetland line that's abutting the development anything beyond that on the low side, this is all wetland. And we'll have to delineate that with, wetland botanists.
Right.
Survey it, locate the flags, submit what they call an NRAD to Conservation Commission and get that line approved. We're showing, or we're proposing to locate graves no closer than 100 feet from any delineated approved wetland line. And that will go through the process. Right now, we're showing all the field within existing field areas, the areas that are plowed and have grown corn in the past year. So that areas are all upland. So maybe the line is a little misleading. It's called wetland line. It's not a stream. There are a stream that goes through that wetland line, but
Right, and,
we will go through that process with conservation.
right, and that is why you will be going
No, I
that
understand.
next step to conservation, so that we can have detailed documentation of what exactly is on that property. Okay. Does anyone else have a question?
My name is Kathleen Dalton. I live at 49 Corbin Road. My concern is for the water. One of those streams runs right through my property. I have lived in town for 14 years. I am concerned about our water supply because I have standing water, surface water that does not leach. I drove here tonight and I drove through many of deep puddles on this road. I know what the water is like and what the water table is like in this town. I know that the soil does not leach as well as some other places. I can only speak for my lot. If you'd like to come by the house, you can see the pond I have in my backyard. It's not really a pond, but it surfaces from time to time. I recently purchased a shed because our garage is so moist that my boyfriend's tools were rotting and rusting. We had to go through the Conservation Commission because the wetlands run through the backyard. I had to have them sign off on our building permit, even though the shed was a pre-constructed structure that was delivered to our driveway. I first had to have conservation sign off. I had to have the building department sign off, as well as the Board of Health. All had to be agreed upon with the setbacks and whatnot from the wetlands. I'm concerned because I know what the water table's like. I've lived here for 14 years. I don't want our water supply contaminated. Whether they put these bodies in a tomb or whether they put them in the ground and bury them green, I have a great concern for that type of situation sitting there. I don't know how deep they're going to dig this hole. I can only picture a body, a dead body, sitting there in the soil in water.
This is why they are coming to us step by step,
I
so
would
that
only hope so.
so
and
that
I
we
would
can-
hope that you would just address our concerns seriously. I am concerned about our water supply. Our water supplies are private. We have wells. Our water comes from the ground. That water that runs through my property comes from that property. That's why I'm here. I'm concerned about our water supply.
And as the Board of Health, our job is to protect the safety and health of the town, and that's what we are here to do. And we will walk through it step by step to find out all the answers that we can. This is a first time for us having something like this before us, so it is going to be a
I know that the
process.
cemetery down the street is not in the wetlands. I know there's a reason that cemeteries are not placed in wetlands.
Thank you.
Good evening. Ken Sellers, 223 Ramshorn Road. I have a question. Who regulates the cemetery?
A private cemetery is, Board of Health can set standards in the town, but overseeing it, I'm not sure. I'm going to give you a
So-
vague.
We've all seen the pictures of the other cemetery, if that doesn't meet up with our standards, what recourse do we have as a town to make them fix it? Because I've talked to a couple real estate agents since the last meeting, and I will tell you that all of the real estate agents that I spoke to and showed those pictures, every one of them said all of the houses that are abutted to that cemetery, their property value is going to go down. Nobody's going to, not nobody, it's going to be difficult for them to sell houses.
And
So what recourse do we have? If we let them come into town, we don't like their cemetery, we don't like the way it looks.
the-
Defer to town council.
Madam Chairman, just to answer the individual's questions, as you mentioned earlier, this is a sort of a first time for the Board of Health, and I believe for the zoning board, addressing a request for a private cemetery. The Board of Health has regulations, actually they're the Town of Dudley Cemetery Rules and Regulations that were adopted by the Board of Selectmen and the Cemetery Commissioners for the preservation and protection of municipal cemeteries. So one of the things that we'll be working with the Board of Health on is the development of rules and regulations that relate to private cemeteries that probably will track these. And a number of these regulations speak to your concerns in terms of the maintenance of the cemetery. The applicant has also presented a petition for a special permit before the Zoning Board of Appeals, which was heard about 2 weeks ago. The Zoning Board of Appeals can grant that special permit with conditions, or if it determines that the special permit does not meet the criteria, the Board of Appeals could deny that special permit. If a permit is granted by the Board of Health or by the Board of Appeals with conditions, and if there are violations of those conditions, then in the same way that the building inspector would inspect a piece of property if you complained about your neighbor doing illegal building without a building permit, then the Board of Health and the zoning board would have the right to bring enforcement actions to ensure that the regulations and the conditions of any approval are satisfied. And if necessary, we'd send a notice of violation. If that isn't adhered to, we go to court and seek an injunction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mary Sansucci, and I live on Ramshorn Road in Dudley, kind of around the corner from this proposed cemetery. I really want to take issue with the plan because the town has drilled a well on this property in 1997, and it's a real gusher. I have a 2-page letter here from the company in Concord that did some data on the well. I don't see it on your plan. You're not aware that there's a well that the town drilled? It is located, that land runs north and south. Is your map drawn to scale?
Yeah, north to south, yeah. It's the scale, yeah, that's the scale.
Approximately right here.
That's huge.
I can show you,
This,
covered by a few trees and shrubs.
this is why that we are going to be sending communication back and forth to have people go out, to have an engineer go out and looking at the property so that we can find information.
Yes. Correct, yeah, it's 1,000 feet from Auburn Road along the westmost stone wall on the property.
And 1,200 feet from Ramshorn. That's your
Yes.
locus?
Yes.
But this isn't drawn to scale because you just said your road is 1,000 feet.
About
long.
1,000 feet, yeah.
No, it's more than that.
The well should be right in this area right here, because the pond is over here.
And this is why this is understanding that it's a preliminary
Okay.
plan, and we will take that when we meet with the engineer and everything. We definitely will.
We'll add that to the list of questions and
For our
it'll be
engineer.
addressed.
All right.
Thank you.
Why aren't the 2 ponds shown? There's 2 ponds on the front.
They're within the wetlands. They're within the wetland below. That
Excuse me,
area-
excuse me. When you have a question, please address us.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Just so that we make sure we're catching every
I
question.
don't see that the 2 ponds are drawn on here.
Yep. Once again, we'll address that with
Most definitely.
the detailed site map.
Excuse me? If you, please, over to the podium so that everyone can hear. Thank you.
To the chair. I would like to direct my question to the chair. Do these people from Worcester, from the Islamic Society, know there was a well drilled on this property in 1997?
No.
Okay.
I just find that hard to believe.
Again, we definitely will add it on to our list of everything that we'll be going over, most definitely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Jamie Chalinas. I live at 185 Corbin. I bought my house 11 years ago, and when I first bought my house, I didn't know too much about the property next to me. I do know that it cost over $30,000 to put my leach field in because it did not pass Title V, and they had to build the ground up. I can't even tell you how many truckloads of dirt they had to bring. I have an embankment on the side of my property that's got to be about 12 feet high, and it literally goes higher than their stone wall to their property. All right, but that was the only way that they could manage because of the high water table. They said that it was the only way to get it to pass, as they had to go through all this. Now, you built some houses, and I didn't say anything when the houses went up because I didn't grasp the concept of how well water went and everything, but when I bought my house, my well water was wonderful, okay? I never came to your meeting because these houses were built on the other side of the street, didn't think they were gonna interfere with my water or anything. I have a daughter who has very sensitive skin, and when those houses were built, all of a sudden my water changed. And I have a very high sulfur content in my water now, and I spend a lot of money on filters because there's 8 of us in my house, which unfortunately I have to have a filter for when the water comes in, and then filter for each and every, so it's very costly. And I never realized at the time when you guys built those houses and you sent out the petition for the drilling, what that was going to entail. All right, researching everything that I have, knowing what I've gone through in the 11 years that I've lived there, okay, I realize how much we don't understand how the underground veins run and how they impact us on every little thing that happens. And I mean, I'm not only concerned about their bodies being in the ground, but the digging to put those bodies in the ground is going to shift soil. It's going to disrupt veins, just like drilling did to Mayan. And it's an expense that I got to live with because that's my home. And I don't get a tax break or anything, based on that. They're saying they don't know what's going to happen 50 years from now because they're not going to be here. They're not going to know who's maintaining the property. And once you allow something, it's like, okay, say hypothetically they don't do it to code, you take them to court. They don't abide by it. You're going to dig up all those bodies and bring them somewhere else because they didn't do what they were supposed to do? That's a big issue. I'm sorry, I'm not, highly educated or any of that other stuff. I don't know all the stuff that you guys got to go through, but I know one thing. I know what I pay, I know what I've been through, I know what I hear, and I know what I read. And it's like, those have got to be serious issues that have to be taken into consideration. That's all.
Thank you.
Yeah, Richard Raymond again. A couple of comments. Previous to this, at your last month's meeting, although it wasn't on the agenda and it was put on the agenda tonight, there was still some comments made, and I believe one of the previous water commissioners was at your meeting, and he made a very interesting comment, and I think it had a lot to do with the 1997 drilling of that well for testing for public water supply, and this is something that you may want to look into. When they did that, there was a mention that the underground aquifer, all right, flows from that area all the way down to the wellheads for the town well right now, okay, where they are, let alone that becoming a public water supply. The aquifer that runs underground goes all the way down to our present town wellheads, okay? Now, I'm sure I'm speaking from a lay position, but you may want to get that verified when you look into that. The area in conservation, we'll deal with it in conservation. I mean, there's more wildlife down there you can shake a stick at right now, and quite frankly, that place is getting overrun very seriously by coyotes. You can sit out on your deck at night and just hear, you know, and they're just going crazy. So therefore, they are foragers, they dig, they do, and so we have some concerns. And a question for town council. Under the Dover Amendment, and I speak, I'm just curious, an application dealing with religious freedoms, okay, gives them great latitude, and the town very little latitude except for regulating some areas, okay. But once that is done, and there's an approval going, how much latitude under a religious commitment does any municipality have dealing because of separation of church and state? Once it's been approved, does the town have the control they would over a private citizen in their regulations? Or do they lose a lot of that control due to the separation of church and state? I don't know. That's why I'm asking you.
Want to handle that in the next zoning meeting? Or?
No, I'm happy to address it, Madam Chairman. As I mentioned earlier, the approvals that the applicant needs to seek from the town to date has been discussed. The zoning board for the special permit for a cemetery in the residential zone, the requirement for the Board of Health approval under Chapter 114 of the Mass General Laws, requirement for Conservation Commission approval for any wetlands that are involved. And in each one of those approvals, and the Board of Selectmen as well, once the Board of Health is acted, has to review the matter. Once those approvals are granted, if they are granted, they can be granted with reasonable conditions. And by reasonable, they are conditions that are not intended to nullify the use, but in the same fashion as any member of the audience and any party in the town of Dudley sought zoning approval or other approvals, they would be conditions that would go to regulate the use in perpetuity. And those conditions could be enforced by a court action. So if an approval is given by the boards in question, those approvals with conditions can be enforced to ensure that the protections that are there for all the abutting properties and for not only the residents of that area, but the residents of the town as a whole, including the water supply, that all of those protections will be enforced throughout the course of the use of that property. And I can tell you that I've been involved in enforcement actions on matters, whether it's a religious use or whether it's a private use, a private developer going in and in the course of development violates a condition of a zoning board or a planning board. Those are enforced by a court action. And in the same way that religious uses are required to comply with reasonable dimensional regulations under Chapter 40A, Section 3, which is called the Dover Amendment, those dimensional regulations must be enforced in a reasonable fashion. But they can be enforced in the future in the event there's 10, 15 years of compliance, and then in the 16th year there's non-compliance. Those regulations and those conditions can be enforced by a court action.
Is that supported right now by some of the private cemeteries which have religious applications, like in the town of Webster? For example, there are a couple of private cemeteries in the town of Webster which are religious in nature. Okay, and do they have something similar as to where there is an enforceable agreement on it? It's just a concern we see many times. Okay, and we hear many news reports that when something falls under the protection of a religious application, and it doesn't matter what the religion is. I'm not here knocking anybody's religion. I don't care if it's Catholic, Baptist, Islamic. It doesn't really matter. But once they fall under the religious protection, okay, as a lay, and I'm going to say it again, as a layperson, I get real concerns about them, the people that fall under that protection having greater latitude than a private citizen.
Well, I think the important thing to point out is that the Dover Amendment that you mentioned, and which, for the members of the audience, the Dover Amendment protects religious and educational uses, which can involve a church, a school, The term educational uses has been extended to include halfway houses for certain types of recovery programs, so that the term religious and educational uses and the Dover Amendment apply to zoning. Now, the Board of Health is acting under Chapter 114 of the general laws, which is not the Dover Amendment. There's a separate set of regulations and statutes that govern cemeteries. And specifically, 114, Section 37 says that boards of health may make regulations concerning burial grounds and interments within their towns. They may impose penalties not exceeding $100 for a breach, may prohibit the use by undertakers, and so on and so forth. As I mentioned earlier, we have a set of regulations for the town cemeteries. What we'll be looking at will be the regulations that the Board of Health can adopt under Chapter 114, which apply to private cemeteries. And then, of course, the Conservation Commission conditions on wetland approval. The Conservation Commission jurisdiction is not impacted by the Dover Amendment. So the Dover Amendment only affects the zoning issue before the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Well, that's an interesting comment. I'm glad you cleared that up, because quite frankly, the way it was presented a couple of weeks ago, it was like a fait accompli. It's done. Dover Amendment, here we come. So,
well, I think I just want to mention, and not to prolong it, Madam Chairman, that at that meeting 2 weeks ago, I reminded the attorney for the applicant that when the building inspector on January 7th said that this use needed a special permit, the applicant the same day filed the application for special permit. The applicant did not appeal the building inspector's decision regarding the fact that it required a special permit, and citing the Dover Amendment, and the 30 days has passed for that appeal. So right now, we're dealing with a special permit before the Zoning Board of Appeals.
thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kathy Hurst. I'm a resident of Dudley for 20 years now, and I live on 15 Camelot Circle with my family. I know this is for the Board of Health, but I hear you keep referencing the Dover Amendment, and since the last ZBA meeting, I've done a lot of research on that, and there are a lot more recent cases concerning that. The Dover Amendment began, I guess it was in 1947, I believe, and became an amendment in 1950. And its original purpose was to protect, to put on a level playing field institutions like parochial schools, so they'd have the same sort of advantages as a public school or a private school. That's what its original intent was. So since then, and I'm just going to read, I've got a whole slew of literature on this, but I like to read this for the audience that my emails have probably not reached. Okay.
If I might ask, please, is it regarding the Dover Amendment or regarding something for the Board of Health? Your email.
I'm just one quick thing, and then I'm going to go into the Board of Health questions that I have. About the Dover Amendment. While a corporation must be merely nonprofit and legally able to engage in educational activities to be considered a nonprofit educational corporation or religious, the actual use of a particular facility must have education as the primary and dominant purpose. That was the intent of the Dover Amendment. And all the legal, and since most recently, 2012, 2014, 2015, there have been cases where people have tried to use the Dover Amendment, and it's being narrowed down now to its original intent. So that's why this whole thing has been kind of a fuzzy math kind of situation for anybody. But my original reason for being up here tonight, I wanted to know who's going to be the engineer to do this process. Is it going to be our engineer that our town employs, or are they going to pay for us to choose an engineer, a licensed specialist?
At this point, we have just received information regarding this, and I think we'll be discussing with town council exactly how to pursue that. But it will be, regardless, it will be, they were responsible for the payment of an engineer.
Right.
It's something that they have to provide to us when we get to that point. And also, we would want our agent, that's why we're asking for all boards present and everything, but I think we're still in the process of trying to work that out.
Right, and just to clarify a point, I was just checking through my notes when you were speaking, but I think you mentioned that it's your understanding that the Dover Amendment only applies to educational uses?
Well, it has, for now it has agricultural in there, but it is not meant to be, if there's any land or building, it has to have an educational purpose, other than agricultural or solar, especially for places like childcare. There's a lot of cases on that, but for instance, if one of the cases was for an elderly complex to be built, it couldn't be done under the Dover Amendment because they could not prove that the foremost predominant use was going to be for education.
Right. There's a Regis College case to that effect.
Right.
The placement of elderly housing on the campus and allow
Right.
the elderly residents to take advantage of courses.
I have several things here, but I've got many at home.
If I can just point out to you, and I'd be happy to send you something to that effect, but 40A Section 3 applies to religious and educational uses. One religious case of note was a Church of Latter-day Saints in the town of Belmont that wanted to build in an area, and there were residents in the town of Belmont that opposed it.
Yes, it was about the height of their steeple.
It was the height of the steeple, and that was a religious use. And the question there was, did the town have reasonable dimensional regulations? You couldn't prohibit the use, but you could require so many parking spaces, so much setback, so much front yard setback, height of the building, things of that sort. So if you're familiar with that particular case, the Belmont case, the Mormon church case,
Right.
that relates to religious uses. This is a religious use. And in 40A3, which has been in effect since 1975, clearly says religious and educational uses. It also includes agricultural uses. So that's the reason that we...
Well, over and over again, and these are recent articles from between 2012 and up till 2015, where they have specified that it had to be, the purpose had to be predominantly educational.
All right. I think you're reading, if you're reading the Regis College case, there they tried to argue that the predominant use was educational. The court determined that the use was not predominantly educational. That only dealt with an educational use. That did not apply to the language of 40A Section 3 says, no zoning ordinance or bylaw shall regulate or restrict the use of land or structures for religious or educational purposes. So,
Well,
Excuse me, do you have any more related to the Board of Health? Certainly.
But the reason I brought up the engineer question is because in looking back on previous cases within other towns, such as Walpole, there was a big discrepancy between what information was given from an engineer that the town procured versus what was originally told to the town. My other questions were, will the Conservation Committee do their own survey as well for our town?
We will be sending them to Conservation. They'll handle different aspects of that.
And it's not only protecting groundwater and knowing where there are streams or wetlands, but in which direction the flow of the water goes. So, and the drilling has to be more than just, has to be throughout the area. Lastly, the perpetual care. I think it was brought up about who was going to maintain, but would that fall onto the town as far as plowing it in the wintertime?
It would be privately owned, so it would be similar to if you own your house, you're responsible for plowing your driveway. Businesses are responsible for plowing their yards. And again, that's more information that would be ironed out further on down the road.
And when this group was trying to get the cemetery in Douglas, one of the questions asked was who was going to maintain, and they said they didn't have anybody that really maintained it except for volunteers.
go ahead. Yes. Did you want to respond? You sure? Okay, you're more than welcome. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Yes. My name's Raymond Bilodeau. I live on 149 Corbin Road. When I look out my backyard, there's a pond on my property. Just above that, directly above that, is the hill where the cemetery is going to be built. Now, when the spring thaw comes in, there are two good-sized brooks that flow down that hill into the pond on the back of my house, which then flows west all along Corbin Road as a wetland. I can't see how that's not going to be disturbed by all of this digging. I can't see how those two brooks and so forth that are not going to be disrupted.
Okay.
And I have that concern. And the other concern I would have would be who will be monitoring to see that this is done, these burials are done properly?
I'll defer to you.
Madam Chairman, if, as we mentioned earlier, in addition to the existing Town of Dudley cemetery rules and regulations, the Board of Health can adopt regulations that relate to private cemeteries. And the issue of maintenance and responsibility would be addressed in those regulations. Those regulations would be incorporated into any decision of the Board of Health, and so they would have to be complied with.
If anyone from the conservation people would like to come down the house in the spring and witness those two bricks pouring down into the pond on the back of my house, I'd be glad to show them. And of course, I have my concerns too, because my well is right there in the corner of that property, and I know where that water's coming from, you know. But mainly, I just can't see this as not disrupting the flow of that water. Those two bricks would flow right down off the top of that hill into that pond, and then go west all along Corbin Road as a wetland, which is shown at the bottom of that map there. But it doesn't show the pond that's up above the property and running through it. I don't see that there either, but, well, anyway, that's my concern.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like just to make a comment.
Certainly.
Regarding the barrier. We are contracted with a funeral home, and it's not like when somebody passed away, we bury him ourselves. You know, it goes to a funeral home, and there's a whole procedure, legal and what have you. So, you know, there's a concern that, you know, the rules are not followed. You know, we could get paperwork from the burial, from the funeral home that does the service on a, you know, quarterly basis or every burial, to send something to the board or something. If that's something that you guys think.
If I can ask you one question. Do you have a burial agent?
Yeah, we're contracted with the burial, with the funeral home in Worcester.
Okay,
yes.
and that's your acting burial agent, right?
The name of the...
Putnam and Mahoney Funeral Home. They do most of our burials, but there have been burials done by other funeral homes too. This is the choice of the family, whichever funeral home, but they are all licensed funeral homes who do our burials.
Okay,
so one question, so that would be the preparation and the burial. I think the original question was about maintenance and upkeep of the property itself.
We will leave it to Board of Health or the zoning board or Town of Dudley, whatever requirements there are for the other cemeteries in the area for the maintenance. We will abide by those regulations, and we will try to comply with those regulations to maintain it. It all depends what are the rules and regulations which are governing other cemeteries in the area, and we will 100% abide by those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Steve Borowski, 161 Corbin Road, Dudley. I got everybody beat. I've been living there for 72 years, going on 73. And the attorney said you were going to abide by Chapter 114.
Excuse me for one moment. Excuse me, could we keep the side comments? I'm having a difficult time hearing. Thank you.
Are we going to make all the rules and regulations on Chapter 114? You mentioned that before, burial, Board of Health regulations, State Board of Health.
Yes, in informing those regulations, the Board of Health can look to the existing regulations that relate to town cemeteries.
Yes.
And then they could also survey regulations for private cemeteries from adjoining communities.
And when I was a wee broth of a lad in the 50s and 60s, I worked for the cemetery department, and there was a burial agent for the town, Tom Scott, and he did for years and years. And that, I just say, we had one, but I think over the years, it's been let go.
No, the Board of Health does have a burial agent that works for the municipality cemeteries.
Okay, good. He probably can do double duty.
That is correct, yes.
Oh, very good, very good.
A private cemetery that does come into the Board of Health, it's my understanding, through reading through, they can provide us with a burial agent. They have to be registered with the town and everything. That's why I was asking. And that's more information that will correspond to you as well.
I'm just wondering about Section 35 of Chapter 114. It says lands to be used for burial. No land other than so used and appropriated on April 10th, 1908 shall be used for the purpose of burial if it is so situated that surface water or ground drainage therefore may enter any stream, pond, reservoir, well, filter gallery, or any other water used as a source of public water supply or any tributary of a source so used, or any aqueduct or other works used in connection therewith, until a plan and description of the lands proposed for such use have been submitted to and approved in writing by the Department of Environmental Protection. Are we going to abide by that?
Yeah, I can go ahead if you'd like.
Yes, Madam Chairman, we would. If in the course of the Board of Health's review of the proposed cemetery and the plans and documentation that will be requested, has already been agreed that certain information is going to be provided.
And Chapter 36 also says agreed parties may appeal directly to the Department of Environmental Protection for a hearing.
Yes, that's from if there was an approval, a final approval of the plan.
So we have a recourse if there is an approval.
Yes, and if there was...
There was one other paragraph, I forgot, it's 33 or 34. If after 10 people are buried and they decide to abandon it, it goes to our wonderful Board of Selectmen for upkeep, as if their budget's not strained enough. So that's all. And is there any thought of any wellhead protection for the well?
At this point, we're still in the beginning stages. We want to gather our information and see, and then go from there. By all means, we're open to everything, and we're going to take it step by step.
Well, the wellhead protection zoning bylaw says that the water department can put wellhead protection on existing or future sources of water. So if they paid to have that well drilled, and also to, they got a good water report, except the one kicker was radon, and that's remediated by aeration, but the rest of the water was good. And who knows in the future what the water needs for our town is going to be. So if we...
That's probably something that we'd have to direct towards the water department.
I wish you would, okay?
Yep, and they're aware of proceedings that are going on.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
In addition, Madam Chairman, just for the information of the speaker, the Zoning Board of Appeals has a right to request reports from town departments when they're considering the zoning issues in question. And if there is any indication from those reports that the wellhead would be affected, then they could certainly make arrangements to have that review under the Groundwater Protection District. And the other thing I'll just mention, just for the information of the audience, that the zoning board has already started its public hearing. There's no limit on the amount of time that the zoning board has to conduct its public hearing, so they've continued it to March 3rd, I believe, for the next meeting. And they can continue it as necessary to receive the information and keep the public hearing open. And only when they close the public hearing, they then still have 90 days to deliberate and make a decision. The Board of Health, under 114, Section 34, has no time limits on its period of deliberation. So I just wanted to mention that for the benefit of the applicant, if they're not aware, and for the members of the audience.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question that I thought of when Ray was talking about how the stream runs down into his backyard. I'm very familiar with his pond. I drive by it 365 days a year. It constantly, it'll be high, it'll be low, it'll be whatever, depending on how much rain we get, whatever. I have special tubes that we had to put around my house to try to force drainage to go elsewhere because the natural springs that come down were flooding out my basement. And I have a rock foundation and I have a dirt floor, and I can't tell you the mess that that made in my basement. Okay, and we have to constantly put stuff on the rocks to keep the rocks from shifting and everything else. But all these cow ponds that they're talking about and everything else literally is on my side. Like I can see the cows when they used to bathe. We could hear them splashing around and everything else in the water. So when they put their vaults in the ground, if they do that, okay, is that going to kind of form like a barrier, just like these veins do, like where they have to find alternate routes? If there's obstacles, is all that water going to back up and make it that now it turns that into almost like a swampland because it's got nowhere to drain? Because every time you put a stone in the way, it's got to find another route and another route, and the more you bury, all right, the more obstacles you're going to have, and eventually the water is not going to drain as fast, which is going to cause all the land that's closest to my house is going to be saturated. And you're going to start to have smells and everything else from just the fact that it's going to turn into like a swamp. You know, I mean, I know from experience, like I said, I have all these drains all over my house just to keep it so it doesn't flood my basement out of control. All right, because there's that much water that runs through my property. I have pine trees. I can't tell you how many pine trees. He can tell you how many pine trees because he's lived there longer than I have that I've lost in my yard because the ground has so much water that pine trees, their roots are up on the top of the ground, they've fallen over. All right, and it's like because my ground is just washing away because there's so much water that runs through my yard. So if you do have all these obstacles and you don't have, you have drainage because each one is so far apart, but eventually if you have too much water, it is going to back up to some degree. And it's not going to be able to drain properly into people's ponds like Ray's.
That is something that we will definitely mention when we meet and go further. Thank you.
That's my thing.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Laurie Smith. I live on Pierpont Road. I know at the onset of the meeting you had asked that a written proposal on how they're going to bury their dead is going to be given to the Board of Health. I was wondering if it would be possible for them to give us a brief overview tonight so that we would have an idea of what they typically do.
Well, I gave that overview in the zoning board meeting, but it is just to reiterate that Muslim burial is no way different from the traditional Jewish and traditional Christian burial. We wash the dead body and put it in a 100% biodegradable cotton shroud. We don't embalm the bodies, and the preferred way is to put the body 5 feet under the ground. But we are not, I would say, asking for the green burial. This is called green burial, which is most eco-friendly burial in the world, and most of the cemeteries in all over the United States and internationally are now preferring the green burial. But we are not, what we have, as we have mentioned, that whatever is the requirement of the town, whether you want us to put it in a concrete vault or any other vault that reduce the contamination to the surrounding, we will abide by that. I'm a scientist myself. I have worked with FDA for 25 years as a medical device in the medical device area. I know what contamination is, and I assure the board and everybody sitting here that we will do our best to mitigate any concerns which have scientific evidence and which are legitimate concerns. We will try to mitigate those.
Thank you.
If I may ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
If the board is going to put restrictions on, if this does get approved and they do have to put the bodies in a concrete vault, how is that going to be regulated to make sure that each burial, if they have their own burial agent, I'm assuming in the municipal ones right now, our burial agent is the one that's ensuring that that's done. If they have multiple ones, how do we ensure that? Because fines is all well and good if they do not follow through with it, but the damage is already done, the contamination is there, so, money isn't going to fix that.
I do know that burial agents they have to be registered with us, and there is recourse, and I understand money and fines, for a burial agent. They have to be registered with us through the state. So it's like almost like they have a license and they're risking their license. It's
So
not.
they will be verifying they
Yeah,
follow
they
follow.
have rules that they have to abide by as a burial agent. The burial agent for the town of Dudley certifies that everything goes the way it should. They're going to have to certify to us, and they're going to, especially if it's a funeral director, that is which our burial agent is a funeral director. They're not going to jeopardize their licensure and everything. They have to certify to us that everything is going the way it should be. I really don't think that they would jeopardize their licensure. But again, we can set different standards and things as we're working on it as to follow-ups and see that things are done properly.
Okay, thank you.
And Madam Chairman, just to add to that, under the same section, Chapter 114, Section 37 of the Mass General Laws, which gives the Board of Health the authority to adopt regulations, it also says that in the event that there are violations of the regulations, that the Board of Health has the authority to close any cemetery or other place of burial within the town for such time as they consider necessary for the protection of the public health. So the requirement to abide by the burial agent and the conditions of burial would be in the regulations. The regulations would be incorporated in your decision, and then you have the state statute that allows you to enforce it. So.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I can make a comment.
Certainly.
Just another comment regarding the burial and the maintenance. It came up a couple of times. Chances are we'll probably, the congregation will hire somebody local particularly for the excavation, to have somebody who has a local backhoe, and similarly for the lawn maintenance. At the end of the day, if the project is approved and the cemetery is ongoing, we mentioned that at the zoning board. The only marker on the ground is a flush plate, probably a little bigger than this sign. That's going to be flush with the ground. The remaining would be grass. So basically, it's a lawn maintenance issue, which chances are we'll hire somebody local to maintain the lawn.
May I ask a question?
Certainly.
You say that the grave marker will be flush with the ground,
Correct.
and that it'll just be mowing lawn, which would follow along with perpetual care. A lot of the folks here have been showing pictures of Enfield with concrete block and big stones and whatnot. Is this cemetery to be different from Enfield?
I can't speak to that cemetery. There may be some other from, the majority could be from other, like Turkey or something, that they are used to putting markers, and so there's variation, but I can assure you this one would be a plate on the ground flush with nothing else.
So you're saying that you are a different entity from Enfield, and you're not following the practices that they follow in Enfield? Thank you.
Thank you.
Lynn
Trajan, 129 Corbin Road, and I missed the last statement. Did you say you are not going to follow with the procedures of the burials at the Enfield, Connecticut grave sites?
As far as the above ground or below ground?
As far as how it's going to look topographically when you look at it? You said
It's-
there's only
it's
going to
gonna
be a
be
small
level.
plate. Okay, so then this here is not what your cemetery is going to look like, correct?
Thank you.
Not necessarily.
Excuse me?
No.
Excuse me, just please let everybody have their
I'm just
chance to
saying
speak. Go
that
ahead.
this cemetery has brought into but this is not the right example, and this is not the example for all cemetery. If anybody goes to the West Roxbury Cemetery, that is very different from this cemetery, how this appears. We will most probably follow the cemetery in the West Roxbury, which have the flush nameplates, and there are nothing like this that you can see in the Gardens of Mercy in West Roxbury Cemetery.
May I
But
ask-
this is the
excuse me,
Enfield, Connecticut.
Excuse me. May I ask a question just to clarify something for everyone? I think it might. The Enfield, Connecticut Cemetery, you do not own.
We don't own. This is
It is owned by another entity?
Yes,
And
it
there
is.
are other religions, you said Turkey, other
Other
things?
sects, yes.
Other things buried, it's not just the Greater Worcester Islamic Society burying there. Is that
Yes.
correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
That
thank you.
cemetery is under the supervision of Islamic Center of Connecticut.
Okay.
And as far as the maintenance of that is done, to my knowledge, they have given the charge of that maintenance to a local area. It's called Williams Monuments or something. I think they do the maintenance. So I don't know why this is brought over and over as if it is our responsibility to maintain this cemetery where we are using, and we are grateful to them that they allow us to bury our loved ones over there.
Okay.
The big concern that was going unsaid is that these photos show where the burial site that you're using currently, and the big concern is that if you are able to put a cemetery here in Dudley, that it would indeed look like this one as well. That's why it keeps being brought up, because it needs to be said.
We understand that, and we will keep it as tidy as possible in our control, that we will keep it very neat looking and very tidy.
Okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And one other thing that I'd also like to address, I understand that right now there are regulations for the public cemeteries in the town of Dudley. However, each of those cemeteries are roughly between 1 to 2 acres in size, and right now we're looking at a lot of 55 acres. And granted, they're saying they're only going to use 25 acres. That's what the proposal is now. What is going to be down the road if this is approved? And I do have great issues with the water table being disturbed by that site. My property runs downhill from there. That stream off of the property from the ponds runs all the way through the backs of our yards, all the way down over to Mr. Borowski's property.
Excuse me?
And then it goes all the way down, feeds down all the way down to Hayden Pond, Merino Pond, all the ponds. I have great concerns about the water table.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt Dix, 184 Corbin Road. I have a question. It was earlier discussed that we're going to have an on-site meeting with engineers to dig holes and take readings and things of that. When those actions are taking place, do we have rights to be there? Do I have the legal right to hire my own engineer to be present at that? Could I be invited to that? Would these folks invite me? Would the current owner of the property invite me? Who would I ask so that they can review the documents that are going to be generated by this engineering firm, just to confirm it, because everybody makes mistakes?
Could you ask people to speak into the mic? I'm hearing impaired.
Oh,
and I
most
can't
certainly.
understand half of these people.
Okay, thank you.
This fellow, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Okay, please, if you could, when you come up, please be sure to speak into the mic. It is difficult to hear in the way
Matt
back.
Dix, 184 Corbin Road.
I'm going to refer to you.
Madam Chairman, I think that certainly the Board of Health, as these arrangements are being developed, can consider having representatives of the neighborhood group present. We probably would want to have some designated representatives so it would be known in advance. That way there could be at least some element of control on the site. And it would be somewhat similar to a site visit by a zoning board or a planning board, where members of a neighborhood might want to attend the site visit and observe what's going on. And then what we want to do is make sure that we wouldn't have a whole lot of interaction at that time. If we're going to have the health agent and the conservation agent present at that point, we probably would want to wait until the results were obtained. But for the purpose of observation, I think, Madam Chairman, we could certainly make arrangements for that.
Okay.
That, and then in a private cemetery setting.
Can you just
sorry,
lean down?
in a
Thank you.
private cemetery setting, is a bonding something that couldn't be required? Because the best engineers in the world make a mistake, and then the well at my house is no longer worth anything, and I can't get town water to my property. Who's going to pay for that? They might have done everything that we've asked them to do, and I still end up with a piece of property. The biggest investment of my life is worth nothing. So could we ask them to bond like you would a contractor when you're building a school or something like that? I don't know how many millions of dollars we'd have to do that for, but.
Madam Chairman, I'll be happy to look into that question. I mean, there are certain bonding requirements. The planning board, when they're approving a subdivision, can require a bond for the completion of the streets and the sewage and the water line, the sewer lines and things of that type. There are bonds that are required under other scenarios. We'd have to determine whether or not, in reviewing the statutes, whether or not the power to adopt regulations would include the power to bond. But I'll certainly look into it.
I know that would, although I don't think many of us want to lose value to our property if we don't have control over that, or if this scenario doesn't provide us the ability to stop that, at least give us the ability to know that the property we bought has some marketable value for a home of some kind. You know?
Right. I would just mention, Madam Chairman, just to follow up on my earlier comment, that the bonding requirements generally are there to ensure the completion of something, like subdivision roads, or bonds that are required for the completion of construction of an elementary school. When the job is finished, the bonds are released.
Right.
You're looking for some kind of security, ongoing security, beyond the regulations that we'll have, and that's something I'd have to review.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Andrew Jeffers, 136 Corbin Road. I don't know how much bearing it has, but there are also hand-dug wells on that property, so I don't know if that is conservation or historical, national heritage. I don't know who would want to look into that, or if you can fill them in, or because one of them is located towards the back of the barn. Found out the hard way about 10 years old, don't go over there. Well, the board's broken. I had to dig my way out. So I know there's at least one. I've been told there's others. The other thing is, I don't exactly know how to ask it, but everyone's concerned about the property being wet. Now, depending on the time of year and the year, that property is extremely wet or extremely dry. And granted, I'm only turning 32, but from what I can remember, that property is mostly wet, and the fields that are hayed, depending on spring, fall, sometimes don't get cut because the fields are so wet. So you could this year go, this is the swamp, this is the delineated wetland, this is the field. Next year, that could be all underwater from drainage. And that's one of my concerns on the property. So.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Wesley Moraska. I just have a question to the Board of Health, also, for the people. You brought up a lot of information, but you need to think a little deeper and bring it up, everything to Board of Health and our engineer we have one. That's another thing I would like to bring it up. we should have bona fide civil engineer to oversee the engineer. Granted, this blueprint is not even close what's out there. This gentleman didn't even know there was a well there. You know more than anybody in here. Whatever you can come up, bring it in. Wells, septics, whatever it's out there. So everything it goes on the blueprint. And we should oversee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Sansucci, 212 Ramshorn Road. I'm wondering if you're planning to conduct any water tests on the 40 or more wells in the immediate area. They're on private land, and that they surround the 55-acre property in question. I think a baseline in terms of the quality of their water should be established in case down the road there are issues with pollution. And I would also ask that studies be conducted which will indicate how much water flows off of that land, because you can see on the topo map, it does flow off of that land, and it ends up in Hayden Pond and beyond there, and what the amount of water is that leaves that 55 acres and ends up in neighbors' yards and ultimately in Hayden Pond.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll just take a couple more and then,
I don't know who owns the property, but when she just said that, she reminded me. There's a house that was built on Hayden. It's on the opposite side of all the other houses, not sure of the number, but whoever got the permit to build that, they built a dirt bridge, and we had a bad year one year, and you know what? Those people got stranded on their property because their driveway washed away, because the water that came down was so strong. Don't know who it was if you're even in this room, but it was so strong that they literally couldn't get out of their yard because it was gone. And then just a little further down Hayden, there's another bridge that is to somebody's private property. Don't know if they're in here, but they also, it was paved, and the water was so high, it sunk their pavement in, and they had to pay a lot of money to have that whole thing reconstructed, because I think there's two houses down there that share that driveway. I think it's 79 and another number, but they share that driveway. And it was another thing, high water, washed it right away. And you never know from year to year. It all depends on how our winter goes and how much rain we get as to how high it's going to be.
Thank you.
My name is Henry Jeffers. I live at 133 Corbin Road. And one thing, I am hearing impaired. Anyone that's come to the mic, I ask them to please speak very distinctly and very clearly. I also volunteer to be one of the site people to help when you send somebody down that needs to know the area. I've lived at that location for 40 years. I know every inch of Charlie Meninsky or Annabelle Meninsky's land. I also recommend, as another representative, Steve Borowski, because he's a lifetime member, and he and his family have lived on the land and used to own that property that is now the Meninskys. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Steve Borowski again, 161 Corbin Road. We are hearing all this stuff about, and we have all...
Use the mic.
I'm trying. We have hearing all the well problems and everything else. May I make a suggestion that the planning board rescind cemetery use where there's no town water? If they had bought property where there was town water, you wouldn't have this problem. So, I think, we have to maintain our own wells, our own septic system. We're out in the hinterlands, probably forgotten by everybody. But we haven't, we have to take care of our own wells and everything else. If something happens, nobody's going to pay for it. If our septic system backs up, we're going to call the guys that come and pump it out. If the well goes, we have to get somebody to work on the well. You know, we're basically almost self-sufficient. Get a piece of land where there's town water, and then you can have your cemetery.
Thank you. Okay. I just want to thank you for coming this evening and thank everyone. I will be sending information to town council, we'll be corresponding, and then I will forward on to you what we're looking for. Okay, and just so that you know, our next meeting is March, the third Tuesday, sorry, hold on, March 16th, I think yes, it'll be March 16th at 6:30, and you should have correspondence from us before then. I thank you for coming out this evening. Thank you for your time. Thank you to everyone. Thank you. Okay, now we'll be moving on to old business. All right, I'll recess the meeting for 2 minutes for everybody that would like to leave. Take a recess. Thank you.
Yes.
Not in,
Hopefully I didn't do a close-up on my lip.
yeah. I think we can see.
Okay.
Do you have any
All
questions
right.
of me, Madam Chairman, before, I know you've got old business you're dealing with, so,
We just have a couple quick things to get through.
yeah.
Then if I can touch base with you real quick before you leave?
Oh, sure, I'm happy to wait, yeah.
All right, so first up is old business. We were supposed to be having a rabies clinic in March, but it seems to be that that'll be postponed due to not having a current clerk at this time. We will get it going in the future as soon as possible and keep you updated on that. We will be having Earth Day coming up in April. We'll work on a date for that. Offhand, I think it's, for some reason, it's going to fall around that same Saturday that we're doing the emergency preparedness, so we might have to bump it off a week so that we can do that.
Earth Day is the day before that.
Okay, so we're going to have to bump it out a week, either before or after.
Yeah, we were planning on that third Saturday in April.
Yeah, I think it's the 23rd.
Is that, Earth Day is?
The 22nd, I think.
Earth Day is the day before that.
Yeah. So we can push it back a week or push it earlier a week, you know.
Our Earth Day event or the?
Our Earth Day event.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll see what works for everybody and we'll get that going. Any other old business? Okay, moving on to new business. There were a couple complaints and we'll touch base. I will be sending that to the health agent. At the next meeting, there will be a variance coming in front of us for a well. That information will be coming forward. And one of the new things that I know we need to touch on is it's been publicized quite recently how the state does limited inspections on nail salons. And it's been publicized recently on the news and everything and about one of the salons in Dudley that goes above and beyond. And the question was raised to us if the Board of Health could step in and regulate nail salons and things of that nature. And
Yeah, so the question is, in light of the recent concerns, are we doing everything we can to, in terms of health and safety of the citizens of town of Dudley, should we look into something more? So
I definitely think we should, like, we had to write rules and regulations for a tattoo parlor.
Sure.
I definitely think that this is something we need to look into, need to see if I know the Board of Health can regulate things.
How many nail salons are there in town?
I can think of 2, 3 off,
Yeah.
3 or 4, actually 4 off the top of my head right now.
Are they combined with hair, or are they just nails?
Some are combined with hair, some, I think most of them are combined with hair. Maybe one's just nails, 2 maybe are just nails. But I definitely think it is something that we should look into, and it's something that we could set forward if the board feels, if we're in agreement.
Sure. Sure, let's talk to the health agent and see what research can be done.
Okay, I think that's definitely great, and we'll have more information hopefully for the next meeting. Okay. Any other new business? No?
No.
All right, seeing none.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second the motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion to adjourn at 8:11.